Hello, nonprofit leaders. I'm Sarah Olivieri, your host, and this podcast is here to assist people like you, executive directors, board members, and other nonprofit leaders, make a bigger impact with insights, tips, and lessons learned from nonprofit leaders and experts. Having been an executive director, a board member, and now a consultant and coach, I truly understand the challenges you face. And that's why I'm here. I'm all about working smarter, not harder, so you can make a bigger impact without the burnout. And so is our sponsor, DonorBox. DonorBox isn't just a suite of helpful fundraising tools, it's a partner that helps you raise more money and supports you in retaining your donors. I love their forward-thinking approach. Visit donorbox.org to learn more. And don't forget to sign up for the Inspired Nonprofit Leadership newsletter, where you'll get bite-sized, actionable tips just for nonprofit leaders like you, delivered weekly to your inbox. Sign up at inspirednonprofitleadership.com/sign up. Okay, let's dive into today's episode. My guest for this episode is Neil Shah, who has spent the past 2 decades serving as an outsourced or in-house chief financial officer or CFO for nonprofit organizations across the United States. Organizations with annual budgets ranging from a few $1 million to almost $500 million in annual government and philanthropic revenue. He has implemented anti-fraud proof accounting and budgeting processes and procedures, upgraded new financial software systems that reduce manual workloads, and brought boards along the financial roadmap of the organization through education and storytelling. He is a partner with leadership teams and is able to provide the financial perspective of an issue while also helping those teams understand the non-financial aspects of a situation, which is why I think Neil is such a great guest to bring to you today to talk about nonprofit finances and what a great CFO should be doing. But I'll just share one more thing. He did receive his bachelor's and master's degree in business administration from the Marshall School of Business at the University of Southern California. Welcome, Neil. Thank you for bringing your expertise to us today. Before we dive into things CFO, would you tell us a little bit about yourself personally?
Sure, Sarah. And thank you so much for that really large intro. I don't know how I can live up to that. Like you said, a nonprofit CFO. I live in the suburbs of Chicago, so in the Midwest area, but I'm originally from Los Angeles. We moved out here about 7 some odd years ago, about 8 years ago. I'm still adjusting to the weather, which is a big difference. And people always kind of joke with me, like, why would you move from Los Angeles to Chicago? And I always tell people it's for the weather, the exact wrong answer you'd want to give. But my wife is a psychotherapist. She's got a group practice out here in the suburbs. And then I have a 10-year-old boy, and he is going into 5th grade. And really exciting, over the last 4 or 5 months, he finally learned how to ride a bike. He was always sort of scared of falling and getting hurt, but he saw his friends doing it in 4th grade, and he just pushed himself. And now we all go on bike rides like pretty much almost every day during the summer. So it's been great.
I love it. Well, you just brought back a good memory for me when my son was in like nursery school. All the kids learned how to ride bikes at nursery school. And I was like, what a good age. And so thankful that as a parent, I didn't have to teach.
Yeah, exactly.
Came home from school knowing how to ride a bike, and it was
that's
great.
so ideal. That's ideal.
But what an unlock for all of us who have also had to learn a skill at an older age when it feels a little bit harder. Pushing through and doing that, whether it's through riding a bike or something else, is a lesson to learn over and over again, the value of that. All right. So my first question for you is actually, I kind of hinted this in the introduction, and I asked this because I have worked with several executive directors who had CFOs, but basically who weren't very good, meaning they ended up in a surprise bad financial situation that didn't need to be a surprise. So I kind of want to start off by asking you, like, what do you think doing the job of CFO for a nonprofit well, what does that mean? What are the kind of key things? And feel free to add in the don't do that. It's not this. It's not whatever is easier side of the coin to answer.
Yeah, it's like any nonprofit leader, whether it be the executive director, chief development officer, chief operating officer, the CFO role is tough. It's not easy. I think for the most part, a lot of CFOs in the for-profit space, as they kind of get to the near the end of their career, or if they're just looking for a change, they feel, hey, I'll work for a nonprofit, I'll give back a little bit. It won't be as bad as working for Coca-Cola or whatever, right? And you end up coming in and you're like, whoa, this is a lot different. The accounting is different. You don't hear about things like restricted grants and accounting, fund accounting, things like that in a for-profit. You realize how resource derived some of these organizations are, the nonprofits, where we don't get as many resources as the for-profit world. And so you're dealing with less staff on your accounting team. You're dealing with older technologies, likely broken processes and systems on the finance end because of that lack of systems and technology. And so a lot of times people will come in, a CFO will come in and be like, oh my God, this is a disaster. How do I fix this? And the lucky ones are able to, the hard work, the ones that can get through it can fix it and move forward. And a lot of them can. I think a lot of times also a lot of CFOs, if they're coming from the accounting line, so they were a staff accountant and they were a controller, and then they jump into the CFO seat. The CFO seat is a blend of backward looking, understanding the accounting, understanding the compliance, the rules, all of that. But it's a lot more on the forward end. And so be able to take that data and be able to project out what's going to be over the next year, next 5 years, et cetera. And I think a lot of accountants sometimes struggle with that. The good ones are able to kind of transition into that seat really, really well. But I think it's generally a hard situation to be in. I didn't come from the accounting world. I didn't come from the finance world. Quite honestly, I came from the tech world. And so I was a startup entrepreneur way back when during the dot-com era, and a failed entrepreneur, I should say. Tried many, many businesses, nothing worked out. I was now 7 years out of school and never had a regular job because I kept trying to start these businesses. And I kind of fell into the nonprofit world. Didn't know much about nonprofits. And at that time was the public charter schools that I was working with. I became an outsourced CFO and I just kind of learned accounting on the job. But I came in with the mindset of customer service and sales and keeping the client happy. And so I brought that mentality around the CFO and the finance function. There's a big piece around like making sure that we spend the public dollars appropriately, right? And accurately, that we're reporting on them and that we're spending them according to the rules and that we are compliant and that we have clean audits. All very important. But I feel the bigger job of the CFO is to build that partnership with the senior leadership team, being able to educate and provide great service to the various divisions of the nonprofit, helping them understand their budgets, helping them understand that sometimes it's a no if they want to do something, if they want to overspend or they want to do this or that. It's not just a no, though. It's a no, but let's find a way together to do it. Maybe we could do it this way instead or that way instead. Here, maybe bringing some options, but having that creative brainstorming. I think a lot of CFOs being the accounting mindset kind of struggle with out of the box thinking. But because I came in without that and I learned accounting on the job, I feel like I bring that first naturally. And I think that's what makes a really strong CFO is being able to think out of the box, being able to project, think of solutions and ideas and not just bring problems and say no to them. And so I think that's what really makes the best CFOs is being able to take the information that you have, partner with the right teams, and then being able to give ideas and options to whether it be a division or whether it be the board or whatever that might be.
I love that answer so much. And I love that you come from that entrepreneurial background. I wouldn't even call it failed because I think it's partly why you're able to bring so much goodness to this space because
Thank you.
some of the things
Yeah.
you've said, like I've seen CFOs who are really, I don't want to be insulting and say glorified bookkeepers, but they're really focused on like tracking the money. And if we only focus on what happened with the money in the past, we really lose this element of having control and decision-making power over what we can do with our money in the future, right? And that's
Mhm.
ultimately like, we can't change the past. So there's only so much attention you should put on documenting what happened,
Yeah.
essentially. Not that you shouldn't document it at all, right? And then the
Mhm.
other trap I feel, but if we only document what happened, then we're really not helping the organization that much. We're helping the IRS a lot,
Yes. Yeah.
but we're not necessarily helping organizations because unless they're using that data to make future-based decisions, which so often doesn't happen. And then again, another kind of trap that I see folks get sucked into is nonprofits are a highly regulated industry,
Mhm.
right? And then within their different specialties, there are even more regulations. But just to be
Mhm.
a nonprofit, it means the IRS and various states are looking at you more closely. There are additional regulations, and it's easy to get sucked into like everything has to be in compliance. And not to say
Mhm.
that it shouldn't be in compliance, but that's still not the most important thing when it comes to making an impact or achieving
Yes,
your mission, right? It's
absolutely.
bad if you're out of compliance and then you're paying fines or you're getting shut down. Of course, that will stop you
Mhm.
in your tracks. But staying in compliance is not going to make you achieve your mission.
Correct.
So it's also not good to be stuck in that compliance mode or to treat that as something that we can't think out of the box, right? And of course, there's a big difference between thinking out of the box, coming up with a creative solution, and coming up with an illegal solution, right? We don't have a legal
Exactly.
solution, but
Exactly.
there's so much space to
Mhm.
have legal, financially appropriate, financially sound decision making that is out of the box. But I think there's so much emphasis in the nonprofit space on the compliance and on the historical bookkeeping that sometimes we don't hear a loud enough voice from the financial
That's right.
space. We are strategy. We are future decision makings. Like literally, we know how to use the fuel of money to make
Mhm.
stuff happen. And I don't hear folks talking about that nearly enough, but I hear you talking about it. So I think that's really, really key. So I want to go in there, but before we do that, because I want people thinking like, oh, but there's plenty of people out there. I can't afford the kind of CFO that we're talking about. And that's where I think this concept of like fractional CFO comes in. And the fractional concept we've talked about before on the podcast. But would you just take us into what does it mean to be a fractional CFO for nonprofits compared to having like a full-time in-house CFO?
Yeah, yeah. So the fractional executive market, I think, is growing quite a bit, and especially I think since COVID, with the virtual meetings and being able to support clients much more throughout the country, I think has definitely back way back 15 years ago. I had a charter school back office organization, and we called it outsourced CFO at the time, but now the new term is fractional CFO. And so I think there's a lot of opportunities for smaller nonprofits when you can't afford a full time CFO to be able to use the services of a fractional CFO, where an individual might have a handful of clients ranging anywhere from 4 to maybe 10, where they split their time and they focus really on the output of the information. So you've got already your bookkeeper, or you've got somebody kind of entering the invoices and processing payroll and whatnot, keeping the books sort of clean. The fractional CFO can come in there and actually look at the numbers, analyze the numbers, and help the executive director or the CEO make sense of the numbers, and then being able to then say, with these numbers, what can we do? What are the investments we can make this year? What does our cash look like a year from now or next month? And so being able to project, being able to analyze, being able to take the data and being able to go in front of your board every single month and present those financials as the fractional CFO. And I've done that many, many times in my career as well. And I think that's where the fractional CFO can be the most useful in terms of board presentation, leadership presentations, the analysis of the data. It has to be clean, right? We talked about that earlier, where it's
Yeah.
compliance. That's all really, really important. It starts there, but we can't stop there. And so being able to have a in-house CFO, a full-time CFO, or a fractional CFO to be able to make sense of those numbers and project, I think is really what makes the best nonprofits have some level of financial leadership at whatever it might be. 10 hours a week, 5 hours a week, or 40 hours a week, maybe being able to take that information and partner with the various stakeholders of the organization to really understand the financials and understand what the strategy behind that can be for the organization.
Yeah, so key. And for those of you listening, I'm just going to make a bold statement. I don't know if Neil would say this, but I'd say if you are thinking about how do I get somebody at this strategic level, I would say for those of you who even maybe have a full-time CFO, it might make sense for you to shift that position so you're spending a bit more, let's say, per chunk of time without necessarily saying we're going to pay people hourly, but right, have a smaller role of a really strategic fractional CFO leader, and then have a different role who's your lead bookkeeping person or outsource that to systems often these days, right? Like I think there
Mhm.
are still a lot of nonprofits who haven't systematized their bookkeeping essentially and therefore spend a lot of extra time doing it, right? So we can
Yep.
actually save money, streamline, outsource
Yes.
the collection of the data, the accuracy of the data. And so what I'm talking about essentially is a resource allocation, right? Spend more on the strategic brain hiring
Hmm.
and spend a little less on data organization, which we
Yeah.
have a lot of tools and ability to do these days in a way. I remember back my first experience with nonprofit bookkeeping was scanning all the checks that you sent. You
Yeah.
you had to have the scanner and you'd see how many you
Yeah.
could fit on the scanner bed and
Yeah.
you'd scan
Yeah.
and print out so you could keep track of it that way. Wow, it's very old bookkeeping
Mm.
memories, but we don't have to do that anymore, right? In fact, we don't even have to write checks anymore. I just actually recently, I had one legacy client who still paid via check, and because the mail has been so problematic recently,
Mhm.
I was finally like, I can't let you pay by check. Like,
Yeah.
it has to go through ACH. In a way, I was sorry, but I was like, sorry, not sorry, because ACH is more secure. I never see their account number
Yeah.
on a check. I totally see all their
Mhm.
banking information. It can't get lost in the mail. It's tracked digitally and it goes straight from your account to my account. So it like saves me time and it
Mhm.
costs me less to process an ACH transfer than it does basically for you to put a postage stamp
Mhm.
on that check. So it's like a win-win all around in enforcing this nonprofit to pay by
Yep.
ACH. A tiny bit of a learning curve for the client, but really a small price to pay for the
Absolutely.
advantage that we're all going to get in going digital.
100%.
So I've digressed a little,
Yeah.
telling
No,
some
yeah.
stories, but that leads to my next question, because you've talked a little bit about storytelling, and I've heard you talk about this on social media. And I think that's really the bridge between people who really understand numbers and people who need to make the rest of the decision. So tell me, what does financial storytelling look like, and what's the value that that can bring to
Yeah.
organizations?
Yeah. So being a nonprofit CFO for so many years with so many different organizations, I've done plenty of my share of board presentations to finance committees and to boards. And in the beginning, it was you print out the profit and loss and the balance sheet and maybe the cash flow statement, and you put it up on the screen and you're showing Excel all of these numbers. And I started to notice that a lot of times the board members, their eyes would sort of glaze over a little bit when it was my turn. And I felt like I was just reading a bunch of numbers
Yeah.
and not really providing that much value. And so what I started to kind of transform into is the ability to be able to take the data and being able to tell a vivid story around it. And you do that by showing less numbers on the screen. Like, you don't show your profit and loss and your
Yeah.
balance sheet big on the big screen or on the Zoom screen. You certainly keep that information, in the appendix of a finance committee presentation or a board presentation. Especially the finance committee has a fiduciary responsibility to the nonprofit. They need to be able to see that and be able to know that they have access to that information. And so you keep it in the appendix. But what you do instead is the great CFOs, and if you don't have a CFO, the CEO can learn these skills, is being able to take the numbers and be able to tell the story of the organization around it, whatever timeline that might be. I've walked into organizations where, as I'm learning about if it's an interim CFO situation or a fractional CFO situation, I'm trying to learn about the organization. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll take the last 5 or 10 years worth of audit statements and map out and list out all of the revenues, all the expenses year by year. And before AI and all this, it would be manual, but now it's with the use of AI, you're able to kind of input that information in, of course, leaving the organization's name out and all of that. But here's an organization with this much, it's a nonprofit with this much revenue. Here are their 10 years of financial statements. Help me understand the story behind this. I mean, you can simply just do that and you see what output the AI gives. But I generally like to do that because I want to be able to tell the board in the first few meetings, this is the story of the organization so far. Over the last 5 or 10 years, revenues have grown like this over time, but expenses have grown a little bit faster. And this is why we've been operating at deficits for the last few years. Or our revenue has been kind of flatlined, and our personnel luckily has been sort of flatlined as well, but we anticipate personnel expenses to increase dramatically over the next year. So if our revenues continue like this and our personnel goes like that, we're going to start to be in a bind. You can also tell the story over just the last couple of years as well, and just being able to understand, we spent this much on consultants over the last 3 years. This is where we are now. If you show a number, we spent 100,000 last year, now we're going to spend $200,000. You show those numbers on a screen, it doesn't tell as much of a story as to be able to say, here's a chart, here's a graph, and this is our non-personnel spend over the last 3 years. And this is larger than comparable organizations of our size. And you can get this kind of data, again, with AI resources out there. But being able to take the 2 or 3 major points that you want to be able to make, whatever the story might be for the organization, and keeping it less numbers, more visual, and being able to walk the board through. Sometimes it will be maybe just 4 or 5 slides that I'll put up, and it won't be this long slide, because that, again, will get the glazed over eyes, unfortunately. So you want to be able to tell that story, weave in what are the major points. What do you want the leadership team, if you're presenting to them, the senior leadership team or the board, what do you want them to remember from that experience, from that meeting? What's the big takeaway? Is it one takeaway? Is it two or three? Wow, at our charter school, our enrollment has caused our challenges over the last 3 or 4 years. Those challenges have been hidden by the fact that we got a lot of one-time money over the last 4 years. We got PPP and we got COVID response and we got the employee retention credit. We sold a building. And so these things showed our net income to be positive. Every year we heard from our auditor that our net income has been positive, but now next fiscal year, we're not going to have these one-time dollars, right? And so being able to see the overall picture of what we're trying to look at. And when you try to show that picture or try to help people understand that picture with just a flurry of numbers, most people will not understand that. I wouldn't understand that if I was on a board listening to that. So I think it's a matter of being able to understand the data fully as the executive, whether it be the CFO or the CEO, but being able to translate that into a story that people will remember and resonate with, I think is really, really key. It's not something that comes easy or naturally to most people, but it is possible to learn. And it is possible through practice and repetition and all of that. I think it's a matter of really understanding what is the takeaway that you want the audience to have. And they're not going to remember a bunch of spreadsheets, but they will remember the one or two major points that you wanted to present to them.
Yeah, such rich examples there, making me think of a favorite book of mine designed for the entrepreneur space called Simple Numbers, Big Profits. By, do you know this book?
I've heard of it. Yeah.
Greg Crabtree, who runs a accounting agency, CFO firm for entrepreneurs. And a huge point, and it's a small book. And one of his points is your high level numbers that your leadership are really looking at, 4 or 5 on a page, right? Because you will everybody's brain gets overwhelmed by seeing a lot of numbers, right? And it starts to, and even long numbers, right? So like 200,000 or 1,000,000 starts to be a long number. But what you said about making it visual is really what I heard you say, using graphs. And what I know from working with numbers and teaching, hearing the story is when you make a visual graph, what you're really starting to talk about is not any particular one number, but how maybe 2 numbers compared, right? We're talking about numbers in relation to other numbers or in relation to activities. And so if we bring that back to numerical format, we're probably looking at percentages, right? So your revenue doubled, right? Times 2, or it had a 50% increase. 50 is a small number, right? Like literally, right? 2 digits. So we bring things back into the simpler space and it starts revealing and telling us stories.
That's right.
I like to teach my clients who are often the CEOs who need to learn, they need to go a little deeper on their numbers, just to ask, like, what is this telling us? Is this good, right? Look at a number and say, is this number good?
Exactly.
And then that forces you to go, well, just based on a number, I don't know, right? Like I have to see, well, what was it last year? Okay, now we're having a conversation with the data, right?
That's
what
exactly
happened last year? What's the trend? What's the change, right? Well, what if we did this? What if we did that? And then all of a sudden we're scenario planning and my financial heart starts beating. I'm like, let's look at options. What could we do? What would change? Any key you mentioned about you might show like 4 things in a slideshow. And you also mentioned people go to that bottom line, things get hidden in budgets. Is there anything that like kind of tips that you have used over and over again? I don't want to call them tricks, but like strategies, like for how you lay out financial information, or a number that you that you use over and over again that you found really useful.
Yeah. Most of pretty much all nonprofits follow GAAP, right? So generally accepted accounting principles. So what you see on your audit will be your revenues, your expenses, and then your net income, right? And the bottom line change to the organization's value. But like you said, things get hidden in that, these one-time dollars or whatever they might be. And so what I like to do is pull out some of those one-time numbers. I pull out things like interest and depreciation. They're all important, but being able to look that to the side and what will be called below the line. So what you want to be able to do is look at what your operating reserve is, your operating surplus or deficit, sorry. And so your operating surplus or deficit is the revenues that you receive from whatever service, whether it be providing services, receiving grants to provide those services, your philanthropy that you raise, if you sell products, whatever it might be, your earned revenue. Those are your operating revenues, and then all of the expenses associated with delivering those products or services. And those are your personnel and your consultants, and you had to rent a building and all of that. That's your operating surplus. Then there are things like interest income, depreciation, expense, interest expense, these types of things that will come below, and then the one time, right? looking at the trend on your operating surplus or deficit is key. Being able to look at that over the last 5 or 10 years and not so much your net income is going to be really, it will really tell you the story. Are you actually are you spending more than you're bringing in? Because your net income will not always show that, but to deliver the services that your nonprofit is delivering for, creating a situation where you're at a loss every single year to deliver those services. And you got to ask yourself why, right? And that comes down to, well, our personnel has been increasing every year. We give our 3% COLA every single year, right? And yes, most nonprofits do and should. But if your revenues aren't increasing by that same 3% or more every single year, then you will be at some point to the point where you are now spending more than you are bringing in. So being able to look at that rather than just the total net income, I think has always been valuable for me.
Yeah, I love that tip. I found similar, like when I don't go into the CFO stuff as much as you do, but I, for lack of not having a tool like you just described, created a budget template, which I give away now. But it's
That's great.
very similar to what you described, except that I go a little farther and pull out fundraising income and expenses, and I put them below. So I think
Separately. Yeah,
about
that's good.
operating income. So
Hmm.
anything that's directly generated because we have the programs, whether we're charging
Hmm.
program fees or I include like restricted grants. Like if it's just a grant for that program, then I put it as like program driven revenue. And then all of those operating expenses, we have the true bottom line of
That's
what it
great.
takes to run this nonprofit without fundraising. And then we think of fundraising or development like its own little mini business. So it has its
Yeah, yeah,
own simple expense and income line.
yeah.
And then we put like everything else you mentioned below that. So we see, okay, here we are pure without fundraising here, because we need to know like, where are we going to fix? Because sometimes we might fix revenue from a programmatic perspective.
Hmm.
And other times we might want to be fixing revenue issues from a fundraising development
Hmm.
perspective. And sometimes we want to do both. But I just saw too many times, like, especially in board meetings or
Yeah, yeah.
CEOs who had to make their boards happy, we're just going to boost our like fundraising estimate and make the
Yep.
bottom line look
That's
better. But it's
happens
like,
so
no.
much. Yeah.
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 We're just filling
So,
the gap. We're filling the gap rather than trying to solve the actual problem.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. That's what I want people to take away from today. If you heard one thing,
Yeah.
solve the problem. Don't just fill
Yep.
in the gap. And if you need to display those numbers differently, if you need to tell the
Exactly.
story differently to show the real problem, because
Hmm.
sometimes, right, I just want to say too, like sometimes we see that it looks like there's a gap in the financials,
Hmm.
but really that's an investment we're making now and it's not going to have its return for a couple years. And so it's not a real, like that's a problem that was already fixed and looks like it's still a problem because there's a gap in the financials, but somehow we're not
Right.
telling the story, right? We're
Right.
investing $1 million now, and in 5 years, we're expecting
Yeah.
$10 million. That's not a real gap. That's something we need to monitor,
That's right.
that it's happening according to plan, but that's not, we shouldn't be freaking out because we made an investment this
Exactly.
year, right?
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure
Exactly
you
right.
have seen that a lot as
Definitely. Yeah.
all right. So before we run out of time, I do want to talk about professional development because we started off
Hmm.
this conversation with, right, not all CFOs are created equal. I'll just say that,
Hmm.
right? So, but
Yep.
they can get there. And you've been embarking on some CFO professional development. So
Yep.
let's talk about what that means. Where are the learning gaps that you see in the space and what kind of improvements should people be looking for?
Yeah, I think it starts with really understanding the nuances of the nonprofit world, the fund accounting, the restricted grants, being able to, if you're coming into a role from the for-profit world, or if you're a new CFO in there, I think it's being able to take the time to learn those nuances are key. I've also found that the nonprofit CFO is very lonely. You come to this role, you don't know others that are kind of going through similar challenges. And so last year I put together a group of just nonprofit CFOs that just get together every single week and every other week, sorry, and we go through various challenges or issues. And I think that's been really, really valuable still. So I think it's seeking out others, talking to others that might be very going through similar challenges, and just being vulnerable, I think, a little bit. So, hey, I don't know. How do I learn this? I think has always been great. I think nonprofits spend a lot of times the professional development will be kind of focused on the programmatic areas, and
Mhm.
rightfully so, it should be. But I think that some of the operational financial departments don't always get as much on the professional development. I think it's just as important, I think, in so many different ways. And so I think providing those opportunities to help educate your financial folks, your operational folks, I think has always been really, really helpful.
Yeah. And do you think that's especially true now, as we had a wave of automation come in already? And unfortunately, I
Hmm.
think a lot of nonprofits missed it. But now we're getting a new kind of wave of financial automation with AI. Like,
Hmm.
what are you thinking about these days as far as nonprofits and nonprofit CFOs keeping up with these changes or taking
Yeah.
advantage of these changes?
Yeah, I think, like we said earlier, nonprofits are always kind of behind when it comes to the tech stack. That's the industry term in all the various departments. But being and seeing so many different finance teams and systems and processes across so many different nonprofits, I've always seen the situation where we haven't made as much investments into our accounting systems, our budgeting system, accounts payable system, whatever it might be. They're outdated, they're older, and instead, what we've done is we've kind of manually put together pieces where we have to download out of this system, manipulate a bunch of things in Excel, then upload it over here. And we've got now extra people because we have to do these manual processes. And so I think that's what I come into organizations sometimes and kind of look at those processes a little bit, see how we can make those improvements. But I think AI has definitely changed the game a little bit in terms of the speed, in terms of the ability to analyze data, and then eventually I think start to do some of these manual tasks as well. So I've been enamored with AI since it came out a few years ago, or at least became popular a few years ago. And so earlier this year, I launched an organization called Altruva.ai, and we are launching a CFO assistant type of ChatGPT type of agent. And so what this will do is be able to take your data. So you would upload your budgets and your profit and loss, your audits, your fiscal policies and such. And this digital employee, this agent, would learn about your organization, your financial statements. And then when you ask it a question, it knows your data, so it can repeat back the answer to your question. So right now in ChatGPT, you ask it a question, it doesn't know you, and so it doesn't know your organization, so it won't be able to answer something specifically about your organization. But if the agent or the AI understood your data, it would be able to answer. And so we're building out this platform where you can upload your information and then be able to ask it a question. And I found that there's so many nonprofits that sometimes you just want a simple answer to your financial question, and you've got to go through so many layers. So you've got to email somebody, or you got to wait a while, or whatever it might be. And so if you upload your budgets and your last year's profit and loss, and you ask it, how much did we spend on consulting last year? I can't remember. It will instantaneously be able to give you that answer back. And so we're building that out. This is going to be a free service for nonprofits. So similar to ChatGPT, within usage limits, of course, reasonable limits, of course, but being able to create a username and upload your data, and then be able to ask these questions is something that we're launching in November. And then ultimately, we have where there might be opportunities where you can upload your fundraising data and then be able to give it questions around your donor metrics. What's our percentage of individual giving to corporate and foundation giving? And it has your data. It'd be able to answer that question right away. Eventually, you'll be able to do things like create slide decks. Can you create a deck for me for my finance committee tomorrow? Eventually, then there are opportunities that we talked about the manual processes a little bit around having these AI agents, these digital employees, being able to actually enter invoices for you, being able to do bank reconciliations and journal entries and these types of things that are very mundane. We all have people that we have to do that. But I think as AI becomes much more prevalent across every sector over the next several years, I think nonprofits have an opportunity to be able to jump in and be more of a leader with some of these technology innovations and not be behind. The opportunity to be able to keep your finance team smaller than what it is right now, and being able to put more resources to the programmatic area, I think is essential as funding gets cut and costs just continue to rise. But then also the opportunity to be able to not just necessarily lay off those people, but be able to upskill them, retrain them, put them into other divisions, into programmatic work maybe. And so being able to invest in AI, make your finance function much more automated, but then also be responsible about how we handle the humans behind it, I think is really, really key. So that's what we're trying to build at Altruva, and you can check it out at Altruva.ai. It's just really, really exciting how AI can just totally change the nonprofit world. I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you're doing that. And I actually, if you folks listening, if you listen just a couple episodes back to Patrick Waldo, who is a programming expert and actually has been involved with AI for a long time, I shared with him a problem. I don't actually know that it was on the podcast. It might have been the after conversation. But I said I was using chat, and this relates to like why you should use a specialized AI tool for handling your data and not just Chat GPT. So I was complaining to Patrick that I had this problem where I asked ChatGPT to like recommend which dates to send out a series of emails. And it kept saying like July 10th, Thursday, July 10th. And actually Thursday was July 11th. I was like, that's
Mm,
not the correct date. And it spit out the
interesting.
wrong answer 3 times. I was
Oh,
like,
interesting.
why? Like, why can't it just know the calendar? Right. And he said that's because AI like ChatGPT is programmed in a relational way. So it doesn't go read the calendar. Your ChatGPT just associated the 10th being a Thursday and didn't
Mhm.
look, which I had this huge aha moment when he told me that. I was like, oh, that's why sometimes like you tell ChatGPT to analyze some data and you're like, that's wrong. It's sorry, you're right. And then sometimes it's still wrong. So
Yeah,
to really get good data analysis, you do need an AI program that has been told, like, no, you check the actual data, you
that's
make
right.
sure it's actually correct, like a little less of this relational stuff and a little more of the data-driven stuff. So you need those
That's right.
rails in place, those programming rails. So please don't just do this through ChatGPT, but make sure that unless you have a really good understanding of how to make it do
Mhm.
what you're trying to do, and use a specialized tool. So I just want to put in a plug for that in that way.
Right.
And also, there is my hope for the AI space and bookkeeping is that we've had so many automations available for years now, but I think they're not always as accessible, and
Mhm.
transitioning to them feels really hard. And I'm hoping that AI will make transitioning to automation easier. Like for years, we've had the ability, like, everybody can scan their receipts and they can automatically I've been doing this for almost 10 years maybe. I scan my receipt on my phone. I send it to a specific email address, which goes right into my bookkeeping tool, which scans it, reads it, suggests where it belongs. And all we have to do in my team is we just go, click, you're correct. Or no, actually, it belongs to this other category. But it is so much
Right.
faster to just go, click, you're correct, or change one thing. And then
Mhm.
the receipt was in there attached to the record as well automatically because it was
Mhm.
scanned and sent in
That's
and
exactly
tracked.
right.
Like
Yeah,
these things have been
that's exactly.
possible for a while, but I don't see that many nonprofits having transitioned
No, not yet.
to
No.
these automations. And I'm hoping that AI is going to be a huge like accessibility
Yep.
booster that lets people skip the setup, maybe.
That's correct. Yeah. Or implement a new technology, all these expensive technologies out there. And I think that's what always it's the cost of it. It's the change management across the organization. It's so challenging. Right? And it
Yeah.
just becomes
Yeah.
something that gets continually pushed for those reasons.
Yeah. All right. Well, we have to wrap up now. Before we go, what kinds of folks should be reaching out to you and what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, yeah. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. That's been my main platform for posts and just talking about financial storytelling or the challenges of being a CFO. And been talking a lot about AI recently as well. So you can follow me on LinkedIn, and I'd love to hear your comments and feedback on what I'm posting about. And you can check out Altruva.ai, and we'll have that launching in November. And so, and again, that's going to be free for any nonprofit to come in and just be able to create a user account and start to have a little CFO assistant by your side. Of the nonprofits of any size can join that. Yeah, just love to chat with you all. You can reach out to me anytime.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Neil. And thank you out there for listening and everything you do to make our communities better. One small favor for you is the algorithms always work better when there are subscribers and reviews of this podcast. So if you would take a moment to leave a quick review of this episode or the podcast in general, and if you are up for sharing it with a friend or colleague who could benefit from it, we are all about spreading the word so that everyone can work smarter, not harder. Until next time, I wish you all the best.
You've been listening to Inspired Nonprofit Leadership. Thanks so much for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode or the bonus episodes. And while you're at it, please leave a rating and review and be sure to share with your friends and colleagues. Tune in every week for more useful insights and wisdom on nonprofit leadership. Thanks so much for all you do for the communities you serve. Until next time, all the best.